I'd like to ask each of our panelists first to go through and just tell us a little bit about who they are and why they're here, what their interest is here. Would you like to start, Dave?
Yeah, I'm Dave House. I'm chairman of Brocade Communications. I'm an engineer and high-tech executive who's semi-retired, 23 years at Intel and CEO of Bay Networks and president of Nortel and a few things like that. But in my semi-retirement, I got very interested in technology and education because at Intel, I was part of the team that was leading the change that happened in the office and in industry when we moved away from selectric typewriters and carbon copies and physical inboxes to today where people do work anywhere. And I've seen what technology can do, and I've got confidence that that change is going to happen in education. In fact, our kids are driving us into the use of technology today. And so I'm a member of the Tech Museum Board and the Computer History Board and the Silicon Valley Education Board and a member of the Education Technology Committee that put this together.
Thank you. Mark?
Hi, my name is Mark Farrell. I'm a senior financial advisor for Dale Scott & Company. We're a financial advisory firm that works with school districts and community college districts here in California to develop financing plans for facilities and technology. And I'd say about 3 years ago, we started really thinking and looking at how school districts were funding technology projects or not being able to fund technology projects. And what we were seeing a lot of districts do was take bond money out of construction bond programs and apply those towards funding their technology needs. And it really created two problems. One, districts were getting a one-time infusion of capital, adding all this new technology, but then had no way to upgrade and replenish the technology once it became obsolete in 3 to 5 years if you're lucky. The second problem was at some level you're funding short-term equipment with long-term debt, paying off bonds over 25 years to fund computers you threw away 20 years ago. So we began working on a kind of a new idea, and Chris Funk here at Eastside was one of the first districts to move forward with this, where we do we're calling it EdTech bond program. And Chris's $113 million bond program he just got approved by his voters, will not be issued all at once. It'll be issued over a period of about 18 years, give or take. And each time the district issues bonds, they're going to issue short-term bonds, paid off in about 3 years. So now the program that Eastside can implement, they've got a known dedicated stream of funding for the next 15 to 20 years. It allows them to do the long-term planning. And we're, as a benefit, one, we're tying the length of the loan to the life of the equipment, but the financing costs drop to near nothing. 95 cents of every taxpayer dollar will end up going right back into the classroom in the form of new technology.
That sets you up, Chris.
Chris Funk, Superintendent for Eastside Union High School District. This is my 25th year in education, and primarily it's been with 2 school districts, San Jose Unified and now Eastside. Born and raised here in San Jose. And one of the things I just want to stress regarding technology and our EdTech plan is that it's hard to have a vision for technology, for integrating technology in the curriculum, in the teaching and learning, if you don't have an ongoing source of funding. Because as Mark mentioned, you can go after grants, and the grants will last 2 to 4 years, the life of the technology, and then the technology falls or it is ready to replace, and you don't have that funding stream. And so in order to have that vision, you need to have the funding stream. You need to be able to have 4 key components. That's the infrastructure, that information highway, that data storage, that cloud capacity. You need to be able to provide wireless access 24/7, not only in your classroom, but from home, and that's part of our plan. You need to be able to provide the professional development, the time for teachers to really understand and use technology in a way that benefits learning. And then you need to also be able to have the gadgets in the hands of our students. We expect about 65–70% of our students to bring their own, but we also need the ability for our students to extend their learning time at home with being able to check out a laptop of their desire. So those are the 4 components in order to really be creative and innovative and have that vision for technology in your school district.
Aaron?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Eric Hines. I'm an elementary school teacher in Pittsburgh here in East Contra Costa County, and I'm currently on leave from my teaching job to be Vice President of the California Teachers Association. We represent about 325,000 teachers and those who support teachers like counselors and librarians and other educators, speech therapists and so on, as well as other educational school workers in California. And I guess I'm here to represent kind of a little bit of the practitioner's point of view in terms of educational technology, which meant when I started teaching was learning how to thread a 16 millimeter projector and how to use a mimeograph machine where you got purple fingers and the liquid smelled particularly good. And that wasn't that long ago. And so how it's adapted in the schools and how we use it in our classrooms and what the balance of, I guess it's more of the educational side of the educational technology, and I hope to talk a little bit more about that.
Tim?
So I'm Tim Ritchie. I'm the president of the Tech Museum right here. And I think what we can add to this is a discussion about how an institution like ours can add momentum to what schools are doing through technology. We have two principal things we're doing to that end. We have some back-end software that we're adding to all of our visitor experience, which we call the Smart Museum, which will enable people, teachers in particular, kids, to have pre-visit activities, post-visit activities, tie the exhibits to the Common Core, to the Next Generation Science Standards, and then career connections, which we can then send out to teachers and to students after their visit as well. So they're always connected through technology in the classroom to what they've experienced at the Tech. That's a big project for us, a big investment, about a $3 million investment that we want to make because we feel like it can add momentum to what schools and teachers are doing. The second thing we're trying to do at the Tech is create something called the Design Challenge Learning Institute, which focuses on technology and project-based learning. So that technology is not just a screen, it's not just what you're seeing on a tablet, but it's what you're doing with robotics, what you're doing with projects, and you integrate the technology to that, and it becomes a very robust, engaging learning experience, which once again can then be carried on into the classroom as you try to fulfill the requirements of California's rigorous standards and its otherwise known as Common Core, other places, and the Next Generation Science Standards. How do you do that? And we feel like the Tech can add some momentum to teachers as they try to fulfill those requirements.
Well, thank you. How do you do that is a big part of what our policy discussion today should be about. Obviously, technology is a part of most of our lives, even most of kids' lives these days. They've all got their devices, and obviously it should be part of schools. What, though, is the vision for what that's going to look like at the end? What is your aim? What will the school look like? What will the classroom operate like? What will the school district operate like when you have a plan in place? Chris, you're, I think, pretty far along on this. Want to talk about what you see your district, how you see it changing?
So fortunately, the Eastside voters continue to support the work of our board and our staff in Eastside, and so this is the fifth bond that they've passed in the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. And so we have not begun selling those bonds yet because we want to make sure that our plan is fully vetted. Certainly we have expertise in this room that sits on our advisory board for the back end, the technical support. And then we're really engaging our teachers in developing that professional development piece, because really that's the key. If our teachers do not have the opportunity to get comfortable with technology, some of our newbies are more comfortable than others. And as was mentioned earlier, our students are much outpaced our teachers in the use of technology. They use it as soon as they walk out of the classroom, they pull their phones out. So ideally, I think we have to look at two components that was touched on here. One is the technology piece is really just a tool to help accelerate and support the teaching and learning that goes on each day. It doesn't replace the teacher, and it doesn't replace the important interaction between the teacher and the student. But if you have the opportunity for teachers to develop that professional development and what it looks like in the classroom about flipping the classroom, being able to put their lectures on video so students can review the videos at home and then come back the next day for the actual hands-on experience. That is what we're looking for in terms of being able to roll out this type of technology, as well as allow students to extend their learning so that they can learn at home through the software that is out there, being able to access their electronic locker, their open source textbooks, and then being able to collaborate with each other through their project-based learning. So those are some of the components that we're looking forward to and expect to see in the next 3 to 5 years.
Could I comment? I think if you take this out in time and see the vision of what is possible, applying the technology that exists today, big data technology, the ability to track the student or security issues. I understand we got a lot of issues to track. Using the communication technology, the networking technology, the wireless technology that's been developed, I think in the end we get to the point where we are teaching to a classroom of one, where we can customize the training of each individual. We can present material to them in the way that they best learn. Some people learn better by reading, some better by animation or video or interaction or whatever. We can supply them the information exactly when they need it. We can know whether they're comprehending it or not, so that we don't go past them so that they can't learn because they didn't get some of the fundamental material. I think we can be responsive to the interest and needs of the children so that they can take their education in different directions. There's so many different ways that these children will be able to be productive in society and contribute to society. They should go in the areas and the direction where they've got their interest. And my long-term view and vision for what EdTech does is it allows us to really educate to a classroom of one.
Yeah. So Eric, you've spent time, you're still a teacher. Tell us what your vision would be.
I think first of all, there's not a one-size-fits-all vision for all of education in California. We have 1,100 school districts that vary widely, and what works in San Francisco may not work up in Weed, California, not just because of the name. So I think, but we also have to balance. I mean, there's a great seduction to technology, and especially that it's going to fix everything, and that it's going to suddenly change and transform everything just because itself. And we have to remember that on the educational side, what we're really talking about is educating a whole child, and that's really the whole purpose of it. And there's a lot of we need to be sure that when any vision has to balance, if we're talking about choice, that we also balance that actually with equity, because just having choice doesn't bring equity, and we know that. If we're talking about flexibility, that has to be balanced on the other end of the continuum with responsibility. And it's not just about the child, being able to learn every time, anywhere, anything. I mean, that's great, but there has to be some responsibility as part of that as well. And then probably the most seductive piece is the individualization part of it. And that's important, but learning is a communal activity. It's all about the relationships and about the relationships that they build. And so we have to have a balance. Now, I'm no Luddite. Trust me, I can barely let go of my phone. I can't even keep it in my pocket. I've got it held in my hand. But we have to be sure to balance, and that we're really focusing on what the whole child needs to learn. It's not just about teaching them skills to get a job. It's really about creating citizens and creating, ethical grown-ups as they grow up, as well as teaching them the skills that they're going to need, the coding and all of that. I've seen some of that vision happen in schools, and I was at a school in Fullerton a couple of weeks ago where they were learning coding in 2nd grade, and they were learning basic coding in a 4th grade class where they were sitting in small groups, and the group was networked with tablets, and they were all, and one of the little girls went, "I'm going to host this one," and they were actually checking each other's learning, and they were swiping and moving and all this kind of stuff and it seems so natural to them. Yeah. But we just have to remember that we're talking about the whole child here, and not get too seduced into the technology piece of it.
So, Tim, I know you have a concern that in addition to using technology as an education tool, that we also need to do a better job of teaching the kids who aren't learning it on their own how to deal with it.
Yeah, so I think technology as a way to learn subjects is important. And I certainly, being a liberal arts person myself, believe in everything that we've talked about so far. But to a great extent, technology can be and should be an end in itself, kids to become technology natives, because the simple fact is two things. One, that's where the jobs will be. And secondly, if education can be measured in California by avoiding what is becoming a Dickensian universe. We are becoming a Dickensian world between haves and have-nots, best of times, worst of times. And what's going to be a thing that's going to help a low-income student go from where they are to where they can be. There will be no force multiplier greater than technology. There will be no force multiplier greater than becoming a technology native. So yes, it is important to have engaging technology to learn algebra, to learn humanities. But technology as an end in itself will be very important to enable a kid, especially who's a low-income kid, to get from where they are to where they can be. Otherwise, it could be a very dark time in our country and in our state because of this Dickensian world we're creating between haves and have-nots.
Thank you. Mark, did you have thoughts on this, or you're more from the financing end?
I want to be more from the financing end and how to help a district get to the point where they're able to actually implement.
Well, why don't we move to that? Because a couple of you, we were talking earlier, a couple of folks mentioned that the money, it's a shame, but the money is really important. You need the technology, you need the training. Talk about how you approach this when you're helping a school district figure out what to do.
Sure. I mean, I think what we've seen as we look across the state, and every community is different, but one of the things when we do surveys, voter opinion surveys, technology is consistently one of the highest priority projects that every community have. You typically see 70–80% voter support for technology projects. So you're starting with a project that the community likes, but from there, you really then have to start looking at what is the district's plan and really getting that plan communicated out to the voters. One of the other interesting things we do in these types of surveys is we ask a question about how long would you be comfortable funding this technology plan, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, et cetera. And what we see is kind of an increase. As the time extends, if we go to, say, 15 to maybe 20 years, we actually see voter support increase for the measure, and then it starts to tail off again. And what you see is, how we've interpreted that is, voters understand that this isn't a one-time solution. The districts need a long-term plan to create this technology. They're willing to give districts time to implement this as long as that plan is communicated, and then they'll kind of come back and see in another 10, 15 years whether or not they want to fund another round of technology.
Chris, that was your experience with, you just sailed through with the bond measure last year.
Well, I think the story was important, and we had the right people at the table, the stakeholders, to support us in it. Our board was behind it 100%. And if the message is simple, and if you have a history of taking care of taxpayers' money, as we have in East Side with our construction bonds, it's that much easier to sell technology and the ability to have wireless access in the community for all of our students. That was a huge selling point. And for our teachers, the ability to have the time, that's what all teachers want: time. Teachers talk about pay, and I think teachers should be paid more than what they do get, but it's really about time. They want the ability to provide meaningful feedback to their students, and they want the ability to collaborate together and really be innovative in their approach to teaching. That's the number one thing that I think this technology bond will provide our staff.
Anyone else have thoughts on the financing end of it?
Yeah, I would add that we're in an era now where we have local control funding, at the district level with local accountability plans, and that any kind of funding plan also has to build into the future and be sustainable, because it's not just about buying the stuff or just doing the initial purchasing or the professional development. And all. It's about 5 years from now, all that stuff you bought if not a year from now, is already going to be outdated. And so it has to be a substantial plan about how you're going to renew it, how you're going to maintain it, and as well as the accessibility for students at home.
And make sure you raise enough money to handle the professional development and the upkeep of the maintenance and the support, that you've got a broad solution. And that's what this assessment tool that we talked about earlier is really meant to do, is to make sure that you've considered all the factors. Too often the funds are just for the hardware or for a piece of the solution.
Barbara, on the local funding, it's interesting if you go on websites of school districts and there are comments about local funding, there's always a broad support for purchase of technology. It's very interesting to see how much this local funding, even though it's a very new thing, people who are paying attention to, at least the early returns would be that people would favor the use of local funding for the wise use of technology.
Yeah, it's great. I was really pleased that Chris's bond, the district's bond, went so well. Talking about assessments, accountability is going to be important as these things go along. And I'm guessing thoroughly integrated technology in schools would not necessarily mean a soar in student test scores in any way. Might help keep some kids in school. How do you tell people, how do you tell the public we're going to assess this program as we integrate technology into the schools with your tax money?
So with the new California rigorous standards, a big piece of that is what we do call the living skills or the soft skills of critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, creativity. And those are in the process of being developed in Eastside in terms of how we're going to measure. I think the end result is you have your key performance measures, which is your graduation rate, your dropout rate, your A through G completion. But what we've heard from industry is that they need workers that are able to think outside the box, that are able to problem solve, that can work across communicate across different platforms, work together. And those are the type of things I think technology is going to allow us to do a much better job. And then we'll have to clearly define that. But we're in the process of developing those rubrics.
Anyone else?
I would just also add around the assessment. If you're talking about assessing students, then of course you want something that's not, that's going to be some of the computer adaptive stuff that's formative, that gives you timely back information that you're able to collaborate. And I really want to emphasize what Chris said about time for teachers to collaborate with each other and build the assessments, build their assessment literacy as well as their testing literacy as they're beginning to work with students. But in terms of district accountability, we need to move away from just the single test score and think that we're going to buy technology and suddenly test scores are going to rise up and we're going to have a number that we can present in the newspaper to say, this is great, look how well it worked. Because that's not the way it works. It's much more complicated than that, and I think the direction California is heading now with a dashboard of things to choose from to indicate success and how that is working, and I think is the right direction.
I have a sense these measures may be too modest. I think that at the end of the day, what people want to know is, are there less kids in poverty? Do we have more prosperous communities? And so I think the assessment at the school level is important. But at the end of the day, what we really care about is, are we building a better community? And so I know it's difficult to measure that, but I do think that's still the right measure. And hopefully we can figure out as a community that if we shoot for something less than that, we're shooting too low.
Okay. Let me just say, someone, I think it might have been Mark, was going to, if you have them, I know we have limited time, and often there are very good questions from the audience.
Sure. Barbara, let me give you, there's a few questions, I'd say, on both teacher readiness and managing what they call student distraction.
Good ones. Who would like to take both of those on, or one or the other? Student distraction, I'm interested in.
First of all, dealing with student distraction is probably about the number 90% of the job when you're in the classroom.
Right.
But ironically, I was going to, my little prop, this is our educator magazine, CTA's magazine that we send out to all our members. And the article happens to be about print or digital, which talks about either digital textbooks or digital reading as opposed to, hardbook reading. It is available in a digital format if you would like the hard format. Go to cta.org, or I'll give you my copy. But there's one of the problems with, of course, with digital reading and all of those digital devices, of course, is student distraction and the constant distraction. They'll check their stop at reading, check their Facebook, or they'll check their Twitter feed or whatever they'll do, and that's a hard thing to monitor when you're doing that. What we found out for most of our students, most of the students that we surveyed or the teachers we talked to, and here that students still like having the actual hardcover book to read. And we also have to be cognizant of the emerging research around how these backlit readers are affecting development of the brain and the balance again between just the sitting at a computer all day long, whether it's playing games or learning or doing whatever may be good, but also physical activity and actually interacting with the real world and still being able to build relationships and do those kinds of things that a healthy development needs to happen for a child growing up. In terms of teacher readiness, of course, it's all over the map. It starts, of course, with just substituting, so you get the electronic version of the hard version you had, and you kind of feel comfortable with that, and you kind of build up. Again, some of the stuff I've seen is very, very innovative. Some of the stuff you look at, it's like, it's kind of that kind of lesser on the scale of adaption.
So I would like to invite everyone to James Lick High School, which is part of the New Tech Network, and you can walk into the any ninth grade interdisciplinary team taught classroom, and you will see technology being used, because we have furniture where students are not sitting in rows anymore. It's flexible, movable furniture, and you'll see students using their tablets, using the projector, have their iPhones out, and it is much easier, believe it or not, to monitor, because as a teacher, you're now someone that is also facilitating and activating the learning. And as opposed to where I think traditionally most schools purchase their labs. You have your classroom of 32 labs, kids come in, they have the stationary computer in front of them, and it's much easier for them to get lost and lose their attention because they're looking at a screen, they're not interacting. When you have a tablet in your hand and you're working and collaborating with each other, you're holding each other accountable, and that's part of the responsibility that we should be teaching our students, is when they're collaborating together and they're working together, they have a deadline to get that work product completed. But then again, just like you and I, how many of you have already texted someone as you're sitting here listening, or checked your email? You need to be able to learn how to multitask at the same time.
Tim, you probably see a lot of interaction at the tech when you have the kids there. I assume they're...
Yeah, so I would just echo exactly what Chris said. If it's a compelling project, and it's a hard project, and it takes collaboration, and you actually fail, and then you try to get better, and you fail again, and then you finally succeed, time goes by, and they are very engaged. Our whole new suite of exhibits are all based on problem-based exhibits, and the dwell time and the attention time is really great. So everything Chris said, I would say, James Lick, is what we're experiencing at the tech.
Can I add something on teacher readiness? Another district we worked with on an EdTech bond this November, they conducted kind of an internal gap assessment, and it really largely involved bringing teachers together to talk about where they saw the technology vision and kind of where they are today. And one of the things, or two of the things that really jumped out that the teachers identified were, one, part of it's that planning. So if there's a good plan in place that brings in the technology early, that the teachers then have the ability to use and get comfortable with before it's just dropped in the classroom. And the other part of it was using the subject experts at the schools, so those teachers who truly are ahead of the curve in technology, using them as kind of trainers to go to the other school sites and train the other teachers on how to use and better implement that technology in the classroom.
Anyone else have a comment? I have just gotten the dreaded stop sign from the timekeeper here. Yes? Well, thank you all. It's been a really interesting discussion.